Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Broker Breakdown with myself and Mike. Mike, how you feeling after yesterday's golf session?
It was good. The Sims are always a good way to swing a few clubs for a couple hours.
Get that rust off, eh?
Yeah, the loads of that for sure.
Well, did you see how I played yesterday?
It was no, it's good. So the Sims are fun just to swing the few clubs.
Yeah, it's nice to get out, especially being in Canada and the weather's not always like for golf. You might get 5 months out of it, maybe 6 if you're lucky. But yeah, it's kind of nice to get out there and have the rust off already when you go and play your first round, and then you're already discouraged going into the full season after that. So it's a nice little thing to get out for. And technology is crazy, like how you can basically like how they have like a whole like basically like virtual like picture of like every course basically that you can think of, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's definitely gotten way more advanced than what it once was. I played a few years back, and just the actual systems themselves, right?
Little Wii golf, remember that?
Oh yeah, different there.
They have now for the Switch, they have like Switch Golf, and supposedly people are saying Switch Golf is actually better than Wii Golf. I don't know if I agree with that. I haven't played Switch Golf, so I can't really comment, but I think Wii Golf and Wii Sports in general were like kind of nostalgic nowadays anyways.
Right. I never really did it, so I can't even.
You never played Wii Sports?
No. Never had a Wii.
Man, that is like pinnacle of like modern gaming was the Wii.
Yeah, I didn't have it. Didn't have the system.
Were you just not a Nintendo guy? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, N64 back in the day.
Oh, but you didn't kind of go through the steps. Like you didn't go to GameCube and stuff after.
No, absolutely not.
Man,
absolutely not.
Great systems.
I was on the Xbox always.
That's fair. Yeah, but for today, we kind of wanted to dabble into a little bit of a topic that I know me personally, I've had a few questions on recently. So we kind of want to make it at first, kind of more of a general topic, talking about commercial auto, kind of how it breaks down, and there's kind of some different options that you can go for it. And then later on in the episode, we do want to kind of go over what a lot of people, I think, have started doing in the last few years, but more like ride sharing with Uber and Lyft and some other kind of ride sharing, and then also getting into the delivery servicing side of Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and DoorDash and other apps like that, and kind of how it really affects your insurance.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of impacts, some of which are more important to know of and or are more important to the insurance company than others. But I think the entire episode will shed some light on the importance of a few different things anyways.
Yes. Again, kind of like I said, kind of keeping it very general to start off with, but then like I said, going into that Uber and Lyft side, because I know a lot of people have been dabbling into it since it was released in Canada, and the rules are kind of always changing. Companies get out of it, get back into it, and like I said, the rules are very different compared to every company. So you just to make sure that you're covering yourself properly, if you are going to be doing these kind of services with your vehicle. But I think honestly, Mike, I think the first thing we want to start off, and I think I want to kind of change up the script a little bit and kind of start off with this kind of topic first, but to kind of debunk that commercial and auto insurance is always more expensive than personal. Can you kind of touch base on that?
Yeah. From my experience, it depending on what you're using the vehicle for, and every industry is a little bit different, as well as, your driving record as a driver. That's a big impact as well, because obviously that's going to affect your different types of policies regardless. It's certainly not the case, right? I think people in general always assume, your regular personal auto vehicle is going to be the cheapest type of usage if all things are considered the same. Versus commercial, they're going to say, well, if you're hauling, let's use there's lots of people out there that do maybe contracting or similar type work. So there's different classes for that, James, in our business. And it's just not always the case, right? I mean, I say that very openly because some are and some aren't, but
yeah, it's a case by case basis, right? Like it's
yeah,
not,
very much so.
there's going to be times where yes, it is more because depending on the risk, of course, it's going to be more. But there are cases where you do get where the actual commercial side, you could be paying less than what your personal auto insurance might be. So I think going into the conversation with whoever you trust with your insurance, I definitely have an open mind because at the end of the day, like a lot of people that call me about it, they just don't know. They honestly, we get a lot of times where like they always think commercial auto will be more expensive, and I always say, you know what? Let's go with this into this with an open mind because you'd be surprised that a lot of times the actual commercial auto, when you rate it commercially, is actually could be less. And again, I'm not going to say it's going to be less every single time. It obviously depends on the risk, what kind of jobs you're doing, and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, don't go in a negative view, always thinking that just because I'm using it commercially now it's going to skyrocket my premiums.
Yeah, it's certainly not the case. I mean, there's a lot of different factors, right? Insurance for auto, anyways, has a lot of different factors included in it that kind of derive the price. So it's one of those things where you got to just talk to your broker, talk to your agent to find out, what type of usage are you using it for? And then at that point, what type of policy is best suited for you in order to cover those exposures.
Yeah. So kind of segueing from that, I think that was perfect what you just said there. Basically, how we kind of start off this conversation is obviously most people are out there are basically going to have personal auto insurance. But in this case, Mike, is there a way that you can basically add like business use onto a personal auto without having to fully change it to commercial?
Yeah, the big one that a lot of people do is, so if people like real estate agents, us that work in insurance, people like that kind of use their vehicle to go to like maybe client meetings, but not hauling things. We're just driving a little more on the annual kilometer side for different day-to-day driving, right? So you're not going to the same like maybe location or job every day. If we're using it like that, there's a class for incidental business use, which is basically for these different types of occupations, right? So it covers you for more of that driving to clients' places or maybe different job sites. But again, you're not hauling, right? You're not like a contractor that's got maybe a full trailer being towed all the time and tools and stuff in the back. It's just more for people like in sales and different thing. And that'll cover that exposure properly.
Yeah, basically, if you are still going to be using your vehicle for like a personal use, and like you might have like a small little business use on it, yeah, there's ways that we can just tack on basically commercial or business use and business kilometers without having to move it fully commercially. So there are ways around doing it. Like I said, I would definitely reach out to whoever you trust your insurance needs with and making sure you're having those conversations and making sure that it is placed properly. Because at the end of the day, if it does need to move into a fully commercial policy, then we might have to do that. If we can just add this small little bit of commercial use onto your personal policy, then great, we can do that as well. We just want to make sure that it's being rated properly, just to make sure that if there is a claim or if something does obviously happen, we want to make sure that there is no basically gray area where insurance companies can basically come back and say, oh, you know what, this wasn't rated properly or this wasn't disclosed. And there could be, again, be some repercussions to that.
The biggest thing that I think people just need to know at that point is that when you're, depending on what you're using it for, it's really, really important just to be transparent and say, this is what my vehicle is being used for. And these are the type of things that I typically do on a day-to-day basis, right? Especially in our business, I feel like a lot of people in general have the idea where they want to tell just enough to basically say, okay, I'm using it for
just to get it by the line, right?
Yeah, like I'm a contractor, but I'm really just doing sales. Like I'm never going to be hauling it. And then you see the vehicle out on the road and it's fully branded up, like head to toe, and it's got like a trailer behind it, and it's going doing a dump run with 3 guys in the back. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's not your incidental quote business use at that point.
Yeah, let's be real. Like honestly, like if you have a vehicle like that, a truck or whatever it might be, if there's an emergency, there's no way that you're going home, dropping that truck off and taking your business vehicle and then going to a job site. You're definitely just taking that vehicle. So, and like I said, at the end of the day, the premium difference is not that much, if there even is one. So again, just be transparent. I think transparency is a big thing that needs to happen more in insurance, where again, like everyone hopes that nothing ever happens. But the problem is if it does happen and we aren't being transparent, then like things are in that gray area where insurance companies can go and be like, okay, who's not telling the truth? Is it the client? Is it the broker? Like who's not like disclosing the information properly? And then at the end of the day, it's up to the insurance company to make that decision. And if they want to pay out claims, if information has not been disclosed, they could possibly decline coverage, right? So
yeah.
transparency is so important.
That's the big thing. I mean, it's got to go both ways between us as the professionals in the industry asking the right questions when, a different occupation is said, like kind of knowing what to ask for different types of usage, especially if it's like, hey, I'm a painter, I'm a drywaller, I'm a concrete guy. And there's different probing questions that come from that. So part of that is definitely in the industry and on us as brokers and agents for sure. But I think there's a big portion as well that's definitely on the client to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. What's the best policy for me and what can you guys offer? And whether that means shopping around for different people, I'd always advocate making sure you have the right coverage, and then whatever you're doing for price is up to you, right?
Exactly.
But not trying to cheat that out by saying you're doing one thing, but 95% of your job is something else, because at the end of the day, you're running the risk that either A, the policy is canceled for, non-disclosure or misrepresentation, or B, worst case scenario, or I mean, it's not really that much worse, but in the same realm, you are involved in a claim. So hopefully it's not hopefully, knock on wood, it's not like a catastrophic claim. And at that point, the insurance company says, why were you doing this? Like, we never discussed this ever. You said it was driving to and from work, right? Like, and that's the worst case scenario that I would hate for a client to ever be involved in.
Exactly. So kind of moving on, moving into full commercial. So obviously there is another realm that you can kind of go into when it comes to commercial auto, that you basically can have a fully commercial auto policy. And there's a lot of different questions and there's a lot of different codes depending on what you do. So obviously, like if you're a contractor, there's different codes for every contracting, electrician, plumbing, like roofing, all that kind of stuff. So again, the biggest thing I want to say is not every commercial auto policy is going to be higher than what you'd be paying on the personal side. So if you are using a vehicle in a fully commercial or business way, it should be rated under commercial or business, especially, and we see this a lot with companies, is that a lot of companies actually nowadays, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are some, they actually will not take vehicles under the personal side that are under company names. So they have to be instantly rated as commercial. So just making sure that you are rating these properly. Again, if you have a massive fleet of vehicles, obviously we can't rate them personally and add just business. They have to be under a fully commercial policy, Mike. Well,
and I guess what would be the benefit if you have a couple of vehicles and they're in like an incorporated name for a second, for example, your business name, and they're literally for the business. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't disclose that. I mean, that's not benefiting anybody. But hey, weirder things happen, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, just making sure if you are going to be using it as a full commercial vehicle, if you're in like a big fleet of vehicles or a big company where you have a bunch of trucks and whatnot, those are definitely going to be rated under commercial. Like I said, depending on what kind of trade you're doing or what kind of work you are doing, there's going to be 1,000 different ways that we are rated for those. And again, there's questions that we don't see on the personal side that you might be asked. Like, for example, I know, Mike, when I'm doing commercial auto, a big question that we always ask is, are you towing anything? Because that is super important to know, because again, with a lot of these trades and stuff, a lot of these people do have trailers, right, that they tow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be forthcoming on what you're towing. And there's lots of different things, right? I mean, regular trailers, or you got like horse trailers, you got, different people, how far you're going, what's your radius, like all of these things come into that commercial auto side that wouldn't come in on like a personal auto side.
Tools and stock, like if you're carrying the values of those things, that obviously we want to know that, because if you're involved in an accident and that stuff gets damaged, like those are all things that have to be paid out in a claim, right? Which again, aren't really talked about on the personal side, because we would never talk about them, because it's not relevant on the personal side of things, right? But for a business, like I said, there are all these extra questions that we're asking to make sure that we're rating it properly. Even, for example, like there's another question where basically, is there anything attached to the vehicle? So like if there's a plow or if there's like ladders and stuff attached to your vehicle at all times, those are, again, questions that are asked on the fully commercial side of things that we would never ask on the personal side, because we would hope that you don't just have a plow just kind of hanging out on your truck all the time. So
yeah.
Again,
I know we did that small we did small part in a previous episode too about talking about how snow plowing in general is so difficult right now too, with just like the industry and everything else.
Yeah.
So that's I know that's a sore spot for a lot of guys that did that in the past.
Yes, because that industry has completely changed, right? And we've seen the topic we're going to get into shortly is going to be a topic that has changed a lot since it's come out. But yeah, snow removal is not a very kind market to be in right now. And it's, like I said, it's going back to the episode that we recorded before. It's unfortunate because, again, like people obviously want to make money and kind of do stuff to obviously do that. And again, kind of connecting that with like landscapers and gardeners and stuff like that. Like that's like I wouldn't say it's a massive portion, but it obviously is a portion to kind of make money during the off seasons of landscaping and stuff, right? Where nowadays it's like people don't even want to do snow removal because it's just not profitable to do, because on the insurance side, it's so hard to find. And on top of that, it's very expensive to insure because the risk is so high.
Yeah. I have nothing more to add on that. That's basically it there. The one thing I did want to mention too, on just the average person that's driving it for just for personal use, there's different categories there, James, which I'll quickly touch on because I think some people still don't know. But there's like your typical, higher commuting class. So if you're traveling, I think it's over 30 kilometers back and forth to work one way. Most of them have that as like more of a commuting class, anything over 30. So it could be 30 to 100. It really doesn't matter too much. You're still got obviously a higher exposure on that. Anyone else that's lower in that pleasure category. So maybe you're driving like under 30 to work and or just for pleasure use completely. If you're like a retired individual, those are two other slightly different classes of usage as well. And it's always just based on, are you driving to work every day? And then typically, how many annual kilometers are you doing approximately?
Yeah, great points there. Great points. But yeah, kind of moving on to the big kind of portion of this episode that we really want to talk about. And again, it's kind of grown in popularity as kind of we've modernized and kind of gone into more of a world where basically you can basically go on an app, find a taxi, go on an app, get food delivered right to your door. But it's the ride sharing like Uber and Lyft and other ride sharing apps, and apps like Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and like DoorDash. And I know there's a bunch of other apps that do it, but Mike, how does this stuff, like, what do we see in the market right now? Like, how is this, like, how should clients be rating this? Like, if, like, let's say, for example, I wanted to take my truck and I wanted to start using Uber, like, what should my first steps be if I'm chatting with like the person that takes care of my insurance?
Basically just that. Tell them you want to do it and then let them ask the right questions to move forward. It's obviously newer. It has not been in insurance for more than a couple years now. I think COVID really exposed that. Prior to COVID, there was almost no options available to my knowledge. None that I had to be able to help out in kind of my place. But yeah, just basically telling your broker agent you're doing that and then allowing them to find the right company to place that insurance with for you. I think that's step one.
Yeah, like I think realistically, you always got to be transparent. I know we said this earlier on the episode, but don't set up an insurance policy and not disclose stuff and then disclose stuff after, because the biggest thing is every company doesn't do this kind of risk. So if you set up with a company knowing that you do Uber or you do Uber Eats or whatever it might be, and then you want to disclose it after the fact, that insurance company that might not even be the right fit for you So if you would have
Yeah.
disclosed it at the beginning that you wanted to do that, again, as the broker, we would be able to basically place you with a company that actually will be willing to do that kind of stuff. Because the last thing we want to do is place you with someone, be with them for 3-4 months or however it might be, and then you say, well, I want to do Uber, and then we have to go to that company and they say, well, we don't do that, and we have to cancel the policy, and then we basically have to rewrite a policy, move you to another insurance company that will actually do the services you want to do. So I would say, if you know right off the bat when you're starting an insurance policy that you want to do these kind of services, be very transparent and open to whoever's taking care of your insurance needs, and just disclose that to them, so at least they can find the right company. Because like almost everything else, not every company will take this kind of services on.
Yeah, and the one thing that I think people need to be aware of, and there's maybe an assumption from talking to friends or family or other people that do drive, especially if you're in more of like the greater Toronto area, for example, is there's an assumption that the larger commercial policies that these big ride sharing companies have will always cover you, is not always the case, because they're not the ones actually insuring your vehicle, James, right? That's the difference.
Yes, so that is a very good point, is that when you actually turn that app on, and I know this is for Uber, like don't quote me on this for Lyft, but basically right when you turn that app on and you are available taking clients, the insurance you actually have on your vehicle is basically is worthless at that point, because when you sign up for Uber, you are basically now under Uber's insurance that they have. And I believe their insurance they have is through Economical, isn't it still? Or did they move it recently? I think their insurance is with Economical. But like I said, basically once that app is turned on and you're already starting to take clients, your insurance actually is put under like Uber as a whole. But again, from our standpoint, we want to make sure that we're covering you properly, because there's obviously still ways that we're obviously insuring the car for the whole purpose of insuring the vehicle. We obviously are still kind of liable if something happens. But again, you want to make sure that if you are going to be doing this, yes, you have insurance under Uber, but you want to make sure that these things are being disclosed, because again, not every company does it. Like majority of companies actually don't do Uber, and even more companies don't do like food delivery services either. So you want to make sure if you are doing these things, you're placed with the right company at the right time to make sure that you are okay to end up basically doing these kind of things if you want to be doing them with your vehicle.
Well, and also disclosing kind of how often or how much you plan on doing that, because some of the companies that have jumped on boards will have certain kind of not time restrictions, but they'll say, hey, how often are you doing this per week? Just as an approximate, right? If those numbers change, that might not null and void the policy, but it might mean you got to, either reevaluate if that provider is the best for you, or if you got to go elsewhere. And I know for sure, because of the fact that it's still relatively new to the industry, and a lot of people have said, well, I don't want to either pay more, I don't want to have that. There's probably, unfortunately, a lot of people out there driving in the, I'll say the Toronto area, because there's so many drivers there and so many people in general that are just driving without insurance for it, right? They're just insuring their vehicle with any insurance company. And I remember reading an article even a few months back that I forget the name of them, but anyways, they basically had a claim with someone that the policy was done online. It obviously was not disclosed what the usage was. The client had a claim, unfortunately, and it was just fully declined. And it got some heat online, because obviously that didn't happen a lot, right? In the past, it was like, oh, okay, we'll switch the usage, or we'll pay it out, but you have to cancel it. There's a couple of different ways that it can usually work to a client's benefit. And I remember this was just full on canceled with no payout, and that's the worst thing you want to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want that happening. But kind of treading backwards a little bit, I just actually looked it up. Yeah, insurance in Ontario, anyways, is through Economical if you're with Uber. So again, and they are probably the company that if I have clients that are doing Uber, I usually just send them to them, because they are very
like easy to work with, I'm guessing.
Yes, that was the word I was trying to look for when I was kind of blanking out there. But yeah, the restrictions are very low. They don't really have any problems. And like I said, they're probably the most free company to go to if you are kind of doing Uber or anything like that. Where again, like Mike was saying, a lot of other companies will have restrictions on time and radius and what services you are doing. Like I said, a lot of places won't do any food delivery. So you got to make sure that, again, to kind of avoid the headaches of having to cancel a policy because the company won't cover you for certain things and having to basically find another company, probably pay more because, again, with Uber, it's a bigger risk. You got to think you're adding multiple passengers into your vehicle that you don't know. If you're in an accident, there could be a lot more injuries because there's more people in your car. So it's a higher risk. So for me, I always say that usually when you're doing Uber, you're probably going to be paying a little bit more. But again, that's going to offset because you're basically being paid to drive your vehicle anyways. So,
and ultimately, I mean, you're paying for the insurance, you're paying for the gas, you're paying for the wear and tear on your car anyways. I don't understand why you wouldn't want the proper insurance, because that's literally what's there to help repair, your vehicle. And I don't know the exact age requirements, James. Maybe you have a better idea, but I was pretty confident that some of the ride sharing programs now, it has like a certain age of how old the vehicle can be. Right?
Yes.
Like some of them, it can't be older than like a 2015, for example, or something like that.
I think Uber, Uber right here it can't be more than 10 years old.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where you're already buying, or a lot of people anyways, buy newer vehicles to help with ride sharing and to kind of do that kind of self way of making money. So I don't, like, if you had a claim and, you have that newer vehicle, risking that doesn't make sense, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. What I also don't like, they also had a change too, where now like Uber Eats, for example, I don't know if you use Uber Eats very often. I know Braden, our manager, he loves Uber Eats, but you can now like deliver them on bikes. Did you know that?
I did not, but being in Welland, I don't think there's going to be a guy driving a bike to my house.
You'd be shocked, man. I have friends and stuff that like they say all the time, like in Hamilton, like they'll literally, like, all the Uber drivers, or at least Uber Eats, like they have some of them that like will literally ride bikes. I'm like, Come on, like, really? Like,
I guess if it's downtown though, you're probably getting around faster.
But you know what my thing is? Kind of like a little bit of a side discussion here. How can you allow Uber Eats to go on bikes when like the biggest thing for food is quality and like the temperature of the food? Like, wouldn't the temperature of the food be way less if you're on a bike and outside?
I'm going to assume that they've had a conversation about that at some point, but obviously they've been okay with it because it wouldn't have went into practice without it being fully thought of, I'm assuming.
Yeah, because even looking here, like I'm on Uber's website. And again, this could be completely different for other services, so don't just quote us and saying that every service is this way. But this is Uber because I think Uber is probably the biggest one that people use. But actually, for Uber Eats, you can use a vehicle up to 20 years. But for Uber itself as a taxi service, it can only be 10 years.
Oh, interesting.
Age. So there's an age difference depending on what services you use. So that's
right.
That is interesting. Yeah, but I always thought it was like odd that people can just ride a bike and deliver food. Like I said, from a food standpoint, the biggest thing is always the quality. So like if you get food and it's cold, like aren't you going to be like kind of upset, especially if you see someone like riding off with a bike?
Yeah, I would assume that they're only implementing that for places that they have like a guaranteed turnaround time about how fast they can get it from that vendor to the client. Like there's no chance that somebody living locally to me is driving like a 5-minute car ride, so whatever that is on a bike, and then getting that, to my house within like 20 minutes, like the same way a car is. Like, because you'd have to have your bike at the house ready to go. It's just not. I don't see it happening. Locally, big cities, I get it. I get it in big cities.
Another big thing that I'm seeing here that's different between Uber and Uber Eats is that on Uber, you can't have salvaged vehicles or rebuilt vehicles, but on Uber Eats, they're allowing it. So again, another massive difference I see there as well, that they're allowing that to happen.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, salvaged vehicles, typically from an insurance perspective, you're going to have like a structural safety done or something to meet the underwriting of the insurance company in most cases. because obviously a salvage vehicle has been involved in damage in one way or another.
Kind of ending this off here, I did want to kind of make a little bit of almost a curveball on you, Mike. This is something that we didn't discuss before we went on here, but it's something that I actually just thought of, and you know what? This has actually exploded recently in the market. But for example, I don't know if you've ever heard of this company, but Turo for like the car rentals.
Yeah, I've heard of the name. I know it's basically peer-to-peer car sharing. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. So instead of you going to like Hertz or like any of the other big car rentals, you basically it's kind of like Airbnb for car rentals. So you can go on the app or go on the website and basically rent cars that other people own.
Right. So does Turo have their own policy though, or who's like, because you're technically insuring your own vehicle, so whose responsibility is that moving forward?
Yeah, so it's same thing. So they're actually in Ontario, anyways. It's insured under Economical again, and in British Columbia, it's obviously insured through the government. But yeah, like do you think like moving forward in the market, like that's going to be a big thing that changes too? Because I've seen the popularity grow with Turo. And kind of how Airbnb came out with, there was no coverage on the home side and rentals for Airbnb. And then as it started getting popularity, and now there's Vrbo and all those other kind of apps and stuff that you can rent properties from. Do you see like the market kind of changing in a way where like now like there's going to be more companies that are going to offer coverage like a Turo or any other company that kind of does like rental cars? Or do you think that just like companies are going to be like, no, like this is way too much of a risk to basically insure your vehicle, and now you're giving it to random people that we really don't know who's driving this car all the time?
You know what? With times changing, I think insurance companies will get on board with that. But it takes a lot of underwriting. It takes a lot of adjusting of claims to find out like where the payouts are, what types of trends are happening, so that they can properly rate it. I don't know the ins and outs. I would assume that once you've rented it to someone and they're driving it, I would assume it's insured like even all the physical damage is insured under the commercial policy that Turo has, because I don't see a personal insurance policy paying for somebody else. Like when you well, I guess if you give permission though. Yeah, that's interesting. It would be worth a conversation. I don't know how that plays out right now.
Yeah, because like I said,
who's on the hook?
Yeah, I still think it's new. Like I said, kind of like how Airbnb came out with rental properties, and like no insurance company was like had no idea how to like really take those on at that time. And then like now you see like a lot of companies either don't do Airbnbs, they don't do Vrbo, or they have like certain coverages and whatnot that will allow you to do like rental properties through Airbnb and through Vrbo. And again, there are some companies that say Airbnb we're fine with, Vrbo we're not. Or Vrbo we're fine with and Airbnb we're not, right? I think it just really comes down to like the loss ratio of depending on where it's like on, like what app it's on. And if they're having a lot of losses on certain apps, they probably cut that app out fully. But I do think that this is going to be a kind of a almost like a evolution of the market where they're like insurance companies will have to come out with something that basically allows people to do Turo and other kind of, I know there's other apps, but Turo is obviously the biggest one that allows you to basically rent out your vehicle to other people. Again, I personally do believe it is a massive risk. I know there's probably a lot of like underwriting on Turo's side to make sure that people are obviously giving like all their information and they are good drivers and they just aren't just renting cars just to rent cars. But I would assume too that you have to, because like technically speaking, if let's say you have like a poor driving record with some claims and tickets, things like that, you wouldn't be able to get insurance at a favorable rate on your own anyways. So if you're renting it to someone that like does have an unfavorable driving record, I wonder, I don't know if Turo runs reports and whatnot, or if they basically just say it's a short-term thing and they're okay with that exposure. That is a great question. Like how do you basically stop the people that have really bad records just basically going on Turo and renting a car and just using the car without actually having insurance themselves?
Well, unless they do.
Unless I don't, like I said, I've never used Turo. So I don't know if like Turo that you literally have to give like physical proof that you are insured somewhere else, which I would probably assume you do. But yeah, it wouldn't really make sense if you didn't have to do that, because like I said, then people would just go on there and like rent cars without having insurance, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, it's an interesting thing. I mean, to answer the question about like how like, what happens, how long does it go? Like, do companies jump on board? I think the answer is yes. It'll take a little bit of time, right? Companies need to see the larger ones too, right? The larger insurance players within Canada and Ontario, they'll get enough data over time to say, okay, this is profitable. This is the type of risk we want. These are the guidelines to getting a policy in place or to ensuring that type of driver or vehicle. But it takes time, the same way that, like, for example, Uber and Uber Eats took a while and is now a little bit more common in our industry for certain carriers, the same way that Airbnb is common for certain companies that are okay with it and these rental properties, right? So it just takes time. It doesn't happen immediately, never does for anything that's like kind of a newer venture to the industry. But with enough data, they'll get an idea about whether or not they want to accept it, basically.
Let's end the episode off on this note, because I'm literally just reading this on Turo's website right now, and I'm shocked. I cannot believe I'm reading this. Do I need my own insurance under frequently asked questions? No, you don't need personal insurance coverage to book a car on Turo in Canada. Are you crazy? You're telling me that any person that can basically book, and then the next one under that, take this in. Do I need a Canadian license to drive in Canada? No, you don't need a Canadian license to book a car in Canada, which is true. Like, you can technically come over. License. Yeah, but you're telling me that someone doesn't need to have their own insurance to drive and book on Turo? Like, are you nuts?
Well, that makes sense to their idea, though. Their idea is you don't have to have vehicles. You basically just rent others.
That is putting so much liability on Turo's like policyholders in general. That is crazy. They're literally taking on all the liability if there's an accident because that person doesn't have insurance. They're literally taking all the responsibility if something happens.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we just learned something new today.
They must be okay with that, or else they wouldn't have started that type of program.
I will say, like, the kind of like how Airbnb was, there was a massive niche in the market where, like, for rental cars, you just went to the massive rental car companies and that's all the options you had. So kind of like when Airbnb came out, you saw a lot of these places now kind of taking that same kind of like market standpoint where, okay, we like, you always hear the kind of terms, I want to be the Airbnb of rental cars. I want to be the Airbnb of like golf booking sites. Like, look at all the golf booking sites you have now, like apps and stuff that you can literally just go on, click and book courses. It's the same kind of model, right? So,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just, like I said, I'm just really shocked that like they're doing that. Like like I said, they're taking on all the liability. Unlike Uber, where yes, you're insured under Uber, but like you're still have to have insurance on the car as well. But like as a booker, like if I just go and book on this, I don't have to have my own insurance. I'm kind of shocked. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of shocked that they would allow that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm going to assume that they've been able to have enough. They basically make enough through the car rentals, right? Which is the idea that they don't require it, basically, right?
You know what? Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I kind of have to look at it as like a general sense. It's basically like they're renting cars, right? So like when you're a car rental, you have insurance on that vehicle, and like for us, like let's say, like you go down south or something, you rent a car down there. They don't ask for your insurance. They don't even know if you have insurance, right? So I think I kind of almost jumped the ball. Like, you have to think of it that way, that the car is technically insured. And a lot, like if you are traveling from out of country, you're obviously not going to have a Canadian license. You're not going to have Canadian insurance. You might not even have insurance in general, especially a lot of people in Toronto, right? Like a lot of people I know that live in Toronto, they don't have a car. They don't need insurance, right? But they sometimes will rent cars because they just are going out of town or whatnot, or they use it for like business and whatnot. So it makes sense. I just feel like it's a big liability that they're basically putting on themselves almost.
But we don't know too. They probably charge enough for the rental itself to pick up those costs.
Yeah,
like enough people rent them, right?
From my times I've looked at using Turo, it's not cheap. Rental cars in general are not cheap, and Turo is not cheap either, because it's not like it's just like your run-of-the-mill car, like sedan. Like a lot of cars on here are more like luxury vehicles, like into your like Mercedes and BMWs and Lexus and that kind of stuff. You're not getting a Hyundai like Elantra. Sorry, Mike.
That's what I love, baby. That's my it's done me well.
It has done you well. But yeah, I think that kind of ends things off for this week. It kind of just going over again commercial use versus a fully commercial policy, and then going, like I said, over the Uber side, and then, like I said, jumping into the Turo side, because I literally just thought about that when we were kind of talking about it. But yeah, just a lot of information kind of thrown out there. Honestly, I think you could do a whole episode on Uber and then a whole episode on Turo just itself, and like how it kind of breaks down insurance wise, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it would be tough to, I think, fill the full episode, because I feel like it would be like, even the few things we've mentioned, there's only so much to chat about for it.
I think on the Turo side, it's so new still, and and kind of that rental model, like I said, Airbnb has, and like a lot of companies using that model on different businesses now. You will see insurance companies kind of starting to change their like kind of viewpoint on it, but I think it will get there. Like, I think you'll see more and more. Like, if it continues to grow in popularity, insurance companies will have to kind of change and evolve with the times too, because if a lot of clients are asking for it, it's only a matter of time until at least one insurance company says, you know what, we've had enough interest in it, we're going to make a change in our rules and allow this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff does happen in the industry all the time once it becomes kind of common knowledge or enough people want it.
It just takes enough people.
That's really what it is, right? If enough people want it continuously, and it's profitable enough, right? Because that's a part of it. Then you start seeing some companies changing part of their underwriting and appetite, because at that point, you know, putting a policy together makes sense for them.
Exactly. But yeah, kind of moving. It's March now, which is crazy. Like, the first 2 months of the year has just flown by, Mike. But I cannot believe it's March already. But
yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah, so we do want to announce that we actually have a guest coming on. Their episode will be at the end of the month, March 21st. His name's Alex. He is a mortgage broker in Hamilton, and he wanted to kind of come on and kind of discuss like kind of what some of the the landscape right now of mortgages and real estate is right now, especially with a lot of the changes that have been going on. I know when we have him on later on in the month, there is going to be a change coming. I think next week, actually, they're going to be announcing if they're going to be raising or keeping the same interest rates again. And there's a few other things that he has kind of discussed with us about what he wants to chat about. But yeah, no, we're really excited to have him on for the 21st of March. And yeah, just kind of getting more people on the show. I know, like I said, said last episode, we are always discussing with more and more people to get on the show and kind of have that third voice and opinion on here. But yeah, just wanted to kind of announce that we have him for the 21st of March.
Yeah, that'll be super exciting to get a guy that's current with that industry, because I know interest rates have been fluctuating for the last few months here, and people want to kind of know what's going on with that.
Yes, I know we did the episode with David earlier on or late on in 2022, but again, like even in just that small little time, there's been so much change. The market's completely changed since then. So again, to kind of get another opinion and a little bit more of an updated opinion since then will be kind of nice little information for our listeners to definitely get, especially if you're in the Ontario area, which again, that will be mostly what it's going to be on, is what's going on in our province.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for listening, and we'll check you guys next week.